are the prodigies of the decade, the generation of miracles. No player is their equal, and if one were to appear, it would be in the distant future, or so it seemed. Today we're going to rank the miracle generation from weakest to strongest. Now, I understand for the characters in Kuroko no Basket, this list can change depending on the attributes you look at, such as defense, shooting ability, passing, jumping ability. You can have 40 different lists depending on what you're talking about. We're going to be looking at this in a more general sense, going off what the series dictates as quote-unquote stronger players. This will make more sense once we get into the video and I start making some of these arguments, but Kuroko no Basket as a series does lean into this, and I'm going to try and address these minor issues when they come up depending on the character, but we are going to be ranking these characters based on individual skills and how quote-unquote strong they are as players. I will be also taking these characters at their peaks, but their peaks do have to have feats, and that will become more clear when we discuss these characters and which versions I used later on, but without further ado, let's get into the discussion. Starting at the number 6 slot, we have Tetsuya Kuroko, the Phantom Six Man. This should not be really surprising considering Kuroko does operate as a support player more than anything else, being a shadow to someone else's light. All of Kuroko's abilities are rooted in support or utilize his lack of presence, culminating in misdirection, which diverts the opponent's gaze, giving the appearance he disappears from sight. And while there are variations of this, such as the technique misdirection overflow used in the game against Toho, again, this isn't really promoting much from Kuroko as a player or as an individual. In that regard, Kuroko is much stronger in his passing ability, which he uses in tandem with misdirection, leading to invisible passes of sorts. Kuroko as a player is supposed to be borderline average and actually gains an advantage from his lack of presence. Even abilities such as his quasi-Emperor Eye, which are used to overtake the Emperor Eye itself, are due to Kuroko's predictive movement, specifically with Kagami, somebody who spent serious time building trust with and playing with. The results of this revealing the teammate's future beyond the Emperor Eye's future sight, which again operates more as a support role but can be attributed to turnovers if you want to take it in that direction. This specific technique only really working with Kagami and not a general sense. Aside from his misdirection, Kuroko does have somewhat of a bag with his phantom shot, allowing Kuroko to score on Murasaki Bara, the god defender of all people, which in short allows Kuroko to shoot the ball from his chest outside the opponent's FOV or field of vision, like a floater with less of an arc. And the deeper you get into the bag of Kuroko, the more you see how ridiculous he is as a support player with his various passes, such as the Cyclone Pass or Ignite Pass Kai, or even as a dribbler with his Vanishing Drive, effective against Midorima of all people, another Miracle Generation player, but as an individual it doesn't stand quite as tall as the other Miracle Generation players. Basing this list off of something like passing, yeah, Kuroko would be much higher up, but we're more so taking it off of individual abilities, and only with light can a shadow operate. So at the number 6 slot we have Kuroko. At the number 5 slot we have Midorima. Midorima is an example of a player who would honestly be at the number 1 slot if we're basing this off of IRL metrics like point averages or taking a specific category like shooting. This isn't really a case of Midorima being bad, as he's constantly showcased to be a monster in the series, having jump height comparable to Kagami at points, which resulted in the Winter Cup preliminaries coming out to a 104-104 tie. So he actually is ridiculous. It's just that as a shooting guard, his main attribute is shooting. This begs the question of how do we actually judge Midorima, considering he outclasses the rest of the Miracle Generation in shooting by far and is excellent in all of his other stats as well. This leads us to discussing how the characters in the context of Kuroko do perceive Midorima, where we have statements such as Zone Kagami being thought to maybe be better than Midorima while in the zone, a sentiment that Akashi himself does agree with to the point that he actually faces off against Zone Kagami himself. So the series itself does play into this hierarchy to some extent. Off of this logic, it would also stand to reason that the Miracle Generation in the zone would stand above Midorima, who himself has never showcased the zone. I don't know what that would be, if it would be him shooting the ball from outside the building, but more importantly, a lot of this list does change with Kuroko no Basket Extra Game or Last Game, which will become clear with the later placements, as everybody being discussed later on is either at a zone player caliber or just above it. And in Kuroko no Basket Extra Game against Team Jabberwocky, Midorima honestly has a great showing in reference to his contribution to the game, racking up threes to close the score gap, albeit with passes from Akashi. The bigger issue is that characters above Midorima on the list, while clearly not being as great as a shooter, have direct feats against Jason Silver, who we're going to talk about in a moment, who is an absolute animal in his own right, with Midorima not really getting new feats during the game to the extent they actually change his placement. This is why Midorima's at number 5. He's honestly spectacular, just doesn't benefit from extra game like the other characters, all of which get new feats or new arguments for them being above other Miracle Generation players. At the number 3 and 4 slot, we have Aomine, Daiki, and Murasaki Bara, the ace of the Generation of Miracles and the center. These two share these placements and are interchangeable depending on how you view their feats, which is why they are both included in the number 3 and number 4 slot. Who goes where is kind of more dependent on you, which I will talk about in a moment. Aomine is the ace of the Miracle Generation, defined by the isolation that comes with unrivaled skill, being so good at the game he loves that he no longer enjoys it. Now, on top of having a background in street ball giving Aomine an extremely unorthodox playstyle, his dribbling and shooting motions are completely formless, giving him complete freedom, which is why he is the unstoppable scorer in the ace of the Miracle Generations. On top of all of this, his most pivotal attribute is his speed, his inherent speed coming from his instant reaction to his opponent's move, which we will talk about when it becomes relevant. Most notable about Aomine, however, is him in the zone, which is the version of Aomine that is actually taking the spot. This is zone Aomine. The zone, for those unaware, are when players are purged of all thoughts and emotions, allowing them to become completely immersed in the game. More than just ordinary concentration, it entails a singular focus like no other. Being in the zone enables players to draw on maximum potential and strength. That said, it's an extremely rare phenomenon that even top athletes experience unintentionally. Only those who have dedicated themselves to long hours of training can earn the right to stand at those gates. Even then, it's not something that can be done on a whim. Beyond those gates lies the pinnacle reserved for the chosen ones, but Aomine's sheer talent allows him to wrench the gates open by force, sneering at the very challenge he's faced with. The main discussion for Aomine comes about in Kuroko no Basket, last or extra game as I'll refer to. The main point of comparison for Aomine and Murasaki Bara is Jason Silver, the center for Team Jabberwocky, an individual with a body chosen by God itself. He has agility that surpasses Aomine, leaping ability that surpasses Kagami, and power that surpasses Murasaki Bara. As if this weren't bad enough, Team Jabberwocky as a whole is comprised of players at the level of the Miracle Generation, making it that much harder for Team Vorpal's Sword to overcome them. We see that when Silver gets serious, his speed is so high that even Aomine with his reactions and own speed aren't able to stop him. Aomine noting he's fast with him posturizing Murasaki Bara afterwards. This confirming what we already knew about Jason Silver being beyond the Miracle Generation's respective strong suits. It's just being put on full display right here. Furthermore, it actually takes both Kagami and Aomine to stop a dunk from Silver, sending him into shock. However, it is noted that Jason Silver was holding back on his hop specifically in the first half of the game, and during the second half, Silver is without a doubt going at 100%. Even if you want to say he didn't hold his speed back in the first half, doesn't really matter to the main argument for Aomine. During the second half of the game, Aomine enters the zone through zone force activation. Zone Aomine sees a voltage rise, going from having Jason Silver blow past him in terms of speed to being able to cut off Silver entirely while double teaming with Kisei, to the point both Kisei with his perfect copy and Aomine in the zone are consistently able to react and double press Silver. So while in the zone, that whole speed advantage isn't really present anymore, and Aomine can now compete with Silver at a similar level or just react to him in terms of speed. It's actually my opinion, and we'll touch on this more as the video goes on, that the Miracle Generation, while in the zone or at higher levels, are actually able to either be at the level or outright surpass Jason Silver, who's just above them ordinarily. Aomine getting this huge amp in terms of speed shouldn't be a surprise, as Aomine on the physical side is noted to be moving twice as fast in his match against Siren while he's in the zone, and his feats at being able to stop Jason Silver or react to his higher level of speed demonstrates this as well. Furthermore, Aomine is actually able to score on Silver with his formula shots, who is taking the game seriously after the first quarter. Not once, but twice, Aomine performing the feat towards the end of the game as well. Team Jabberwocky making a distinct note of Aomine's speed and form as well. This isn't a one and done, as we see perfect copy Kisei, who is on par with zone Aomine, use Aomine's speed to catch up to Silver and use Murasaki's defense to block his shot. So like I mentioned, the Miracle Generation being in their zone or higher states generally are able to surpass Jason Silver. Another example of this is Kagami being unable to beat Jason Silver in the air to being able to block his dunk later on when in the zone. So it does make a difference, and it's kind of consistent across all the Miracle Generation that when they're in the zone or these higher forms, they just do surpass Silver. Let's take a look at Murasaki Bara and why Aomine and him can be interchangeable in this slot. Murasaki Bara is the center of the Miracle Generation, being the most physically gifted compared to all the other members, having the most latent potential out of the Miracle Generation by a mile, and in terms of pure ability, he might be the strongest. Without question, Murasaki Bara is a defensive monster as a center, Aomine himself admitting him a difficult time scoring on the center. From the 3-point line in, that's his territory. Murasaki's best performance in this discussion, however, comes against Silver during the extra game, who we presented earlier does surpass Murasaki Bara in his best attribute, that being power. This being seen not only through their initial interactions where Silver just dunks on Murasaki Bara, but even as Silver turns the matchup a gear in the second half, Murasaki Bara finds himself challenging Silver to a one-on-one again, attempting to overpower him. This is where it's revealed that subconsciously, Murasaki Bara has been holding himself back out of the lingering fear of injuring his opponents. But with an enemy standing before him whose physical power surpasses his own, for the first time Murasaki Bara's unconscious seal has been lifted and there's nothing holding him back any longer. He can now finally disregard any remaining hesitation, let it all flow, and go full throttle. The results are jaw-dropping, Silver being unable to actually move Murasaki Bara to the point Silver goes for a fadeaway, with Murasaki Bara being able to respond and block Silver. In the movie, Silver directly notes how Murasaki Bara never had the speed to keep up with him before he goes for this fadeaway, and Murasaki Bara just does outright react to Silver's speed. Furthermore, once Murasaki Bara is at full throttle, he's actually able to posturize Jason Silver, overpowering the one gifted by God. Stacking consecutive blocks and dunking on Silver, Murasaki Bara's streak only ended due to an injury sustained after bracing his fall with his wrist, breaking it. So what this discussion really boils down to is Zone Aomine versus Murasaki Bara unleashing his full potential against Jason Silver. And you can see there's a bit of an overlap between these two characters and their respective feats against Silver, where Aomine in the zone is able to close that speed gap. Coupled with his formless shots, he's able to score on the giant, compared to Murasaki Bara, while unrestrained, is able to close that power gap while also having good speed feats against Silver to make this a toss-up. The reason I say this can go either way is, on top of the feats just being very close, it is also due to how Murasaki Bara is a center contesting another center in terms of pure physicals, where Aomine is a power forward. So these two just have similar feats with similar scoring potential against Silver. Murasaki Bara through strict physicals and Aomine through zone plus formless shots, which makes it so these two can either share a spot or be swapped around based on personal preference. I understand Murasaki Bara can enter the zone. I am more so saying we don't have any feats for Murasaki Bara in the zone during the extra game. However, a hypothetical 100% unrestrained Murasaki Bara in the zone would be above zone Aomine, pretty objectively in my opinion, based on these feats, which would also be consistent from what we see with the Winter Cup. As for example, Kagami earlier on was on par with Aomine in the zone. Granted, it's noted Aomine was teetering out or losing stamina first. It was still a close contest in the zone, with this zone Kagami being noted to be no match for Murasaki Bara in the zone back in the Winter Cup. So I think it would be entirely consistent as well. So I think these two can actually be argued around depending on how you value them as players. Again, it can shift. Defensively, Murasaki Bara would be obviously above. However, in terms of scoring potential, you maybe could say Aomine, which is why these two can be either or in the 3 or 4 slot, yet can't really be argued to be above any of the members above them. At the number 2 slot, we have Ryota Kisei. Starting out as the self-admitted weakest member of the Miracle Generation, it's almost cathartic that Kisei be this high on the list. His basketball instinct paired with the ability to copy the moves of other players always made him a formidable player, but what really sets him apart and puts him in a tier of his own is his perfect copy. With this, Kisei can mimic and use every one of the Miracle's generation's moves that he couldn't use before. This can only be active for 5 minutes due to the giant toll the original user's moves takes on them, as the one weakness of the Miracle Generation themselves is how they can actually get injured due to being too talented and their abilities exceed what their body is capable of. But nothing's off the table. Akashi's Emperor, Midorima shooting, Aomine's agility, he can do it all, even combining the abilities to make him completely invincible offensively and defensively. An example of this is him combining Murasaki's block and Akashi's Emperor to stop Kuroko's phantom shot, which hadn't been stopped up until this point in the series, also being regarded as invincible. While we can derive some points from his match against Seirin, where Kais really fits into this number 2 spot is the events of the extra game. In order to shut down the monster known as Jason Silver, Kisei initiates Perfect Copy to match Aomine's Force Zone activation. With the Perfect Copy, Kisei is showcased to be on par with Aomine in the zone, a vivid image of 2 Aomines appearing for everybody else watching, with Nash even noting how Kisei is matching Aomine's intensity. Furthermore, using moves from the other players such as Akashi's ankle break is showcased to be effective on opponents who are in the same tier as the Generation of Miracles. Following this point, in order to preserve Aomine's stamina, even if it came at depleting all of his own, Kisei attempts to lock up Silver on his own, even being able to block his jump shot through Aomine's speed and Murasaki Bara's defense. This relates to what I said earlier, where Vorpal Sword players in the zone constantly are able to perform on par or outright surpass Jason Silver, who is overall stronger than their base abilities. After using Aomine's speed to get past Jason Silver, he actually notes that Kisei isn't just reproducing moves, he's actually getting faster. It's here that it's revealed that Kisei has now entered the zone as he proceeds to posturize Jason Silver. Perfect copy plus zone. Although it won't last very long, without a doubt, Kisei is the strongest or most dominant player on the court. This being evident not only through him posturizing Jason Silver, even with his teammates on Jabberwocky noting that Silver wasn't in an optimal posture, proceeds to score on Silver and other Jabberwocky members 4 times, including this initial dunk. You have Kisei, who is at a zone caliber with his perfect copy, now have another zone amp on top of that, utterly eclipsing Team Jabberwocky, not from just a stat perspective, but keep in mind, again, not only can you use the Generation of Miracles moves, but he can stack them together. Now, it should be mentioned that Midorima's statement is predicated on the information he knows at the time, and shouldn't be extended to later characters such as Nash Jr., who he hasn't seen the full abilities of when making this initial statement, but would still count for everybody else that we've established. Even considering Aomine has left the zone up until this point, Kisei would still be above him considering he was just shown on par previously. So Kisei's placement here really shouldn't be surprising or questionable at all, considering he's just a tier above the perfect copy that was on par with Aomine, who is in contention with Murasaki Bara and was able to perform amazingly against Jason Silver, even compared to Aomine or Murasaki Bara. This also is just the short time frame that Kisei is in this state, as perfect copy only lasts 5 minutes, which is half a quarter, at least in the context of Kuroko no Basket, with each quarter being 10 minutes, with the zone dampening his stamina further. So Kisei is at the number 2 slot, but under these extremely strict conditions, that being perfect copy and zone being active at the same time, which just cuts his stamina down entirely and leaves him with nothing in the tank afterwards. But yeah, Kisei at this point isn't really too questionable. At the number 1 slot, we have Akashi Sejiro, the commanding leader over the Miracle Generation. Now, while Akashi is an impressive player in his own right, other players have made note that he isn't physically as threatening as other members of the Miracle Generation. What sets him apart is his ultimate weapon, the Emperor Eye, the visual ability that enables Akashi to perceive every slight movement of the human body: breathing, pulse, sweat, muscle contractions, everything about the opponent, allowing Akashi to see future movements or just see the future as other players remark it. With this ability, Akashi makes everyone powerless on offense and defense. That's what his power can do. Murasaki Bara himself is convinced that he surpasses every possible technique and no defense is strong enough to stand before him. It's not as if this ability carries Akashi either, as it's noted due to his subtle use of it. Even if someone else were to have the Emperor Eye, they wouldn't be able to use it like this. Akashi is invincible because he has the Emperor Eye, but rather how he uses it. In his match against Siren, he makes Kagami, who is in the zone, seem like a complete child, which sets the standard considering Kagami in the zone surpasses every Miracle Generation member, excluding them entering the zone themselves. The Emperor Eye in Future Sight is such a ridiculous ability, as in terms of physical ability, when Akashi's in the zone, Aomine would still be a superior scorer and Murasaki Bara would still be a better defender, but due to the Emperor Eye, that singular ability that allows him to see the future as fast as they run or as high as they jump, when his reflexes kick in after seeing what they're going to do, they can't fight his foresight. This is to say, and this is going to follow suit with later points I'm going to make, that the Emperor Eye pretty much allows Akashi to compensate for physical gaps between him and other Miracle Generation players. Unless you're so much above him physically, he will be able to see what you are going to do and respond accordingly with Future Sight. This being the exact scenario that plays out when Akashi has his one-on-one with Murasaki Bara and awakens the Emperor Eye. This brings us into the extra game where Akashi needs to switch personalities in order to turn the tide. Part of the reason is due to how the Emperor Eye is Akashi's ability, but he doesn't have ownership of it in his own mind. That belongs to the other created personality. When the personality comes back out and Kisei leaves the game, Kisei notes when he's an ally, there's nobody more reliable than Akashi himself. A somewhat vague notion that implies he's better than other players in a roundabout way by saying he's more reliable than any of them, but this isn't enough on its own right to have Akashi at the number 1 slot. We see with this Emperor Eye, Akashi is able to combat the movements of Nash Jr. and force him to release his trump card, the Bilial Eye, which is set apart from the Emperor Eye in that the Emperor Eye can only see the future of one player at a time, where the Bilial Eye can see the future of not only your entire team, but the opponent's team as well. It's just a way more broken ability. What really matters in the main stock for Akashi being number 1 is we see when Nash Jr. reaches his peak towards the end of the game, he has a distinct change of movements. Midorima noting that they're completely different compared to before, transitioning from a street ball style and playing around with flash moves to a polished orthodox style with textbook form and zero wasted movements. This is Nash Jr.'s original form. Power, speed, skill, all of his parameters are utterly flawless. This is represented with him not only being able to get past Akashi's Emperor Eye with his noted speed and abilities, but also dunking the ball in above Zone Kagami, an impressive feat considering the status quo the Zone Miracle Generation have set during this match. A good comparison to draw on for this all-out version of Nash is that we see Aomine and Kagami are able to block Jason Silver from dunking the ball in, compared to later on where it actually requires Aomine and Kagami in the zone to dunk it in on Nash. It's clear that nobody can really stop Nash. It's here Akashi merges with his created personality, as it's revealed by said personality that the Emperor Eye is not inferior to the Filial Eye, but rather the Emperor Eye is incomplete as a result of Akashi being split into two separate entities. In returning everything back to the original Akashi, the court vision required to flawlessly throw the ultimate passes, combined with the Emperor Eye, will allow Akashi to obtain power that exceeds that of Nash. Gazing into a future even farther than that of Nash's, being able to react to the higher gear of Nash's movements, resulting in a turnover compared to being unable to stop his speed before with the incomplete Emperor Eye. So the metric set for what Akashi can perceive with this Emperor Eye is Nash Jr. going all out, and the question now becomes, does Perfect Copy Zone Kisei eclipse that? Well, we don't really know. We don't really have any links between the two players, meaning it can be up in the air. I personally lean on Akashi, not only due to his previous experiences with other zone combatants, but due to the fact that Nash Jr. is presented to have better feats than Jason Silver, meaning Perfect Copy Kisei and his abilities to overcome Jason Silver and Team Jabberwocky don't necessarily eclipse what Akashi has showcased with his Emperor Eye. Even if they potentially could, it's not quite as tenable as a position. But that's the video. Let me know if you guys enjoyed. Like I said at the beginning of the video, this list can change in a myriad of ways depending on what category you're taking. I went with more of a macro metric leading into what the series provides. However, depending on what you're exactly examining, this list can change dramatically. Let me know your guys' list down below. Do you agree, disagree, why? If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will catch you next time. Bye bye.